Good morning, everyone. Can I firstly say thank you to Ben. I met Ben when he was a first-year medical student in Adelaide. You were, Victor Harbour, Adelaide, same thing. So it's so great to see our students graduating and then standing here and emceeing on such an important day. But I also want to acknowledge that Ben will be our very first pathology trainee. So can we congratulate Ben? I also want to make mention that we do have the Ideas van out the side. So if people have time, please go outside and have a look at the Ideas van, the slit lamp and those sorts of things. It'd be really great if everyone could just go in there and check it out, and we really appreciate them for bringing the van along. Ooh, I touched something. So in my capacity as President of the Australian Indigenous Doctors Association, I would like to warmly welcome everyone to AIDA 2016, our annual professional networking event. I pay my respect to the traditional owners of the lands across Australia on which our members live and work, to their elders and ancestors past and present. I pay my respects to the Yidinji tribe, traditional owners, on whose land we are privileged to hold AIDA 2016. On behalf of all AIDA members and guests, we pay our respects to your ancestors and elders, past, present and future. I pay my respects especially to Aboriginal Elder last night, Hendrik Formile, for welcoming us to country last night, and a smoking ceremony as well. I would like to extend my thanks on behalf of AIDA for the welcome, and it's very important for us to have that welcome to country so that we can start our conference in a safe place. The theme for this year is a journey of strength and resilience. We want to recognise the outstanding achievements of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health professionals as you continue to work, study, graduate and contribute across the medical sector. Our conference program has been developed to ensure that AIDA 2016 is an engaging professional networking and development event that showcases the strength, resilience and contribution of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander medical students and doctors across the profession. I thank my colleagues, including medical colleges, who work closely with AIDA with the development of our 2016 program to ensure a high quality and topical event. I also welcome the AIDA board, all our doctors, student and associate members, distinguished international and national guest speakers and presenters. We have an exceptional and diverse lineup of guest speakers to address you over the next 2 days. I welcome them and thank them for being here to share AIDA 2016 with us. I've just completed 12 months as the AIDA President, and I'm pleased to share some of the notable achievements and work. We know the importance of cultural safety and how that can be achieved through appropriate education and training. In 2016, we continue to build on AIDA's cultural safety agenda with the commencement of work to develop a cultural safety training program. It is my hope that AIDA will continue to show leadership across the medical education, training and workforce sectors to ensure doctors are well trained and equipped with the right skills to deliver culturally safe healthcare to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. AIDA has engaged and represented on key issues impacting on our sector in 2016, including attendance at the Redfern Statement in Sydney through the Close the Gap Steering Committee ahead of the 2016 federal election. Input into the 5th Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Mental Health Plan, attendance at the Rural Health Roundtable hosted by the then Minister for Rural Health, engagement with the leader of the Greens ahead of the 2016 election, ongoing representation across 30 committees at the national and specialist medical college levels, visits to students and staff at medical universities across Sydney as well as Newcastle, Perth and Canberra. Work is underway to support an AIDA delegation to attend PRIDOC, being hosted in Auckland later this year. We look forward to being part of this important biennial event with our Pacific doctor colleagues and sharing culture and knowledge. Our collaboration with the Committee of Presidents of Medical Colleges and Medical Deans of Australia and New Zealand has continued in 2016, and AIDA looks forward to being part of MDAN's Indigenous Knowledge Initiative next month and their conference. A key part of what we do at AIDA is our engagement with medical colleges, medical student bodies and other influential stakeholders in order to drive change and further success for AIDA members. In 2016, we continued to participate in a number of parliamentary and government processes, meetings and discussions, and were represented on 30 national committees, including the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Health Workforce Working Group, Close the Gap Steering Committee, the National Health Leadership Forum, GP Roundtable, National Medical Training Advisory Network, AMA Task Force on Indigenous Health, Medical Colleges Indigenous Health Committees, Committee of Presidents of Medical Colleges, Medical Deans of Australia and New Zealand. In 2016, AIDA developed key policy areas for the organisation to frame the way we advocate and consolidate some of the key issues that underpin what we do and why. Racism in the health sector. AIDA advocates for a health system that is free of racism to ensure that our doctor numbers can continue to grow and that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people can access medical care they need in a way that is culturally safe and equitable. The role of doctors in closing the gap. This year marked the 10-year anniversary of the Close the Gap campaign, and I think everyone in this room already knows the very critical role doctors play in shaping better health outcomes for our people. We looked at best practice in student support. AIDA can see that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander medical students are our future workforce. We want to inspire and support you, and we will continue to advocate across the university sector to ensure you are being supported on your journey to becoming a doctor. Our core values of respectful connections, social justice and human rights, cultural integrity and high standards of professionalism and excellence are evident and realised through this work. This applies equally to non-Indigenous and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people alike. AIDA will continue to support our members, strive for culturally safe places of education and work, and demand better health outcomes for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people through our work on the National Health Leadership Forums, the promotion of pathways into medicine, the development of a sustainable mentoring program, the development of a cultural safety training resource, policy and program delivery, and member engagement and national advocacy on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health. So what's next? In the coming year, AIDA will continue to advocate for achieving parity within the Australian medical workforce. We will work with universities and medical colleges to ensure pathways and ongoing support is in place to give our future Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander doctor workforce the best possible chances along the way in their medical journey. I want to commend all the students who are here today for getting this far. You are a true inspiration to all of us, and we want you to succeed. I encourage you to attend as many presentations and workshop events and activities as you can during your time at AIDA 2016. I also hope you enjoy the social and networking events we have planned. The gala dinner Friday night is themed Blue Moon. I'm not quite sure what that means, but we'll find out. And promises to be entertaining and a good chance for us to meet socially and enjoy ourselves. We will also be given the chance to hear from the 2016 AIDA SRC and see the project they have developed this year. And we'll also be able to, it will give us an opportunity to thank the outgoing SRC and acknowledge the new SRC members. Our annual awards ceremony will mark achievements of AIDA members over the past 12 months, acknowledgement of new graduates and fellows, and this is a truly special moment where new graduates are acknowledged and new fellows are acknowledged and given a stethoscope. And this was a highlight for me as a fellow. I'm speaking off script now. As a fellow, receiving my painted stethoscope was such an emotional time, and I really was so grateful to receive it in front of my fellow colleagues. And that's what this time is with AIDA. It's a chance to spend time with our peers, to get to know the new students, and to build new relationships, because when you go back home and you're working in your isolated area, you know that you can call on your peers and your colleagues when you're needed. So I want to thank the presidents of medical colleges, CEOs and AIDA members, including associate members, sponsors and delegates for attending AIDA 2016. I hope you enjoy AIDA 2016, and I want to thank you and welcome you to this conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carly. Can I just reiterate, getting that stethoscope is absolutely worth every day of hard slog that you guys are putting in. It will be worth it. Just a couple of extra housekeeping things that I forgot to mention before. CPD, for those that need CPD points, just see one of our AIDA Secretariat staff members outside at the table and they can organise the documents for you for CPD. In your packs you have flyers for a survey that we're operating that is very important to power some of the work that we're doing at a national level. The survey's on racism, so really, really be grateful for your input with that survey. It's online, but the link, the address is on the flyer in your bags. And just outside, I believe at the AIDA table is a consent form for photography. I've got a fair few photographers flitting about today, but we just need your permission to use your photos, if that's all right. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Robbyne Quiggin. Robyn's the Deputy Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner, and she's a Wiradjuri lawyer who's worked across legal and policy areas of relevance to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians, including human rights, consumer issues, financial services, governance, rights to culture, heritage and the arts. Robbyne has served on a number of boards, including the Arts Law Centre of Australia and Gadigal Information Services. She's currently the Deputy Chair of the Board of Bangara Dance Theatre, a Trustee of the Australian Museum, Chair of Westpac's Indigenous Advisory Committee, a Director of the Board of the Luitja Institute, and a member of the Indigenous Law Bulletin's editorial panel. Robbyne is Deputy Commissioner to the Acting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner, Professor Gillian Triggs. So thank you, Robbyne. Can I get everyone to applaud?
Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Carly, and thank you for inviting me here today. It's a great honour to be among you. It really is. So I've watched AIDA from afar for a long time, and it's really wonderful to be here. I'd like to begin, as my colleagues have, by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land and waters on where we are today, and reiterate Carly's thanks for the wonderful welcome yesterday and the smoking that Mr. Formal gave to us, because and as you went past, like, come here, it's just wonderful to get an opportunity to have access to our ceremonies and the cultural practices that are unique to us and are part of such an important part of who we are. I'm really happy to be here today to speak with you as Ben described some of my kind of professional activities over the last few years, and basically I'm as he said, I'm Wiradjuri. I'm from a part of central western New South Wales, the Wiradjuri country, and probably, we always get teased about being the biggest mob. People go, I'm Wiradjuri, and they go, yeah, of course you are, because, in New South Wales, yeah, of course you are. But we do take a pretty big, our country takes in a pretty big landmass in between the Lachlan rivers and the Murrumbidgee rivers, and a lot of us have, travelled extensively in and, living and working in Sydney. My part of that country, where my family's from, is over in the far west of that area, very small town called Uabalong that nobody ever really knows where that is. It's a very, very small town right on the Lachlan River, and the larger towns of Lake Jellicoe and Condobolin. So that's where my family connections are, and it's a beautiful part of the world. As Ben said, I am Deputy Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner. Those are arrangements that were put in place when the former Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner, Mick Gooder, took up his appointment as Co-Commissioner to the Northern Territory Royal Commission into child protection and detention of youth in the Territory. I'm enormously pleased that a man who has such integrity and such passion for our people and passion for our young people is, and also enormous understanding of the cultural and linguistic and all the issues that will need to be incorporated and built into that inquiry. I'm enormously proud and pleased that he's there. I wanted to just pass on his very best wishes to you all, and just tell you when I went to a racism conference that the Leitcher Institute held earlier this year, and as you can hear from my CV, I've been in the area of law, human rights, arts and culture, and consumer issues. So the consumer issues is really in relation to where our people get rorted, essentially, by dodgy credit providers, dodgy insurance providers, dodgy product providers, and it's a pretty it's a pretty sort of unknown area, but important area of work, because it can, if you're, if 50% of your salary is being direct debited by somebody who's sold you something that no longer works, it can really impact on how you're going. But I guess that's a long way of saying health. I haven't been deeply engaged in health. I went to this conference and I was just so inspired. I was so inspired by the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and non-Indigenous people speaking about their research in this space in relation to racism and health. I was so deeply inspired. I came back to Mick and went, "Oh my gosh, they're amazing." And he just said, "I told you, Robyn, that's where all the smart people are." So he has a great, a really genuine and he has that kind of that background in health, but he has a really, deep and abiding respect for all of you working in this sector. So I was quite sort of a bit stunned actually at how extraordinary, and the depth of analysis and the wonderful, I was really inspired at the thinking, and so I just wanted to say, I don't come from a deep experience in your sector, but I am enormously, excited to be here and have a great respect for what you're doing. I wanted to just talk a little bit as my experience, as I say, is in the law. I was, in the early days as a student, we set up in New South Wales, NALIA, which is a Gadigal word for warriors. It was the professional association for students and lawyers, and it was the first of its kind. And we were it was a really kind of little. We were sitting in the Corey Centre at the Uni of New South Wales on a Sunday. With a big piece of butcher's paper going, what's our logo going to be? I was very sort of hands-on. We were just kind of designing it ourselves, and how are we going to do this? And it was really important. It was really important, when I think about the journey of strength and resilience, that getting together of us as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander law students. I think Terry Janke was our sort of one lawyer at the time. There was one of us was actually practicing. And, we just thought she was fabulous. And we were just, it was really important for us to have each other and to be together and to do that kind of work and to think about what we might do. And so, I know the value of professional associations, and I think they are, my experience has been it's enormously important to this journey of strength and resilience. And I think, look at it today, and I think, Terry's now look at where all those people are today. She's now running what is, you'd probably, classify as, well, it certainly is our longest, our oldest Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander run legal practice, private legal practice. Being out there in the private sector is no easy task. It's a small to medium firm by now. It's growing, and she, she's as a businesswoman, as a lawyer, as an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander woman, she's an extraordinary example to us all. And Tony McAvoy was appointed senior counsel. Our first Aboriginal senior counsel. I think either late last year, or early this year. So I look back on where we all were and where we are today, and apart from being older, we are, have all achieved pretty astounding things, and I'm sure that's true for all of you today. And I just wanted to note too, we still really rely on those bonds that we had. I look back and think about when I was at uni and walking up the internal stairs of I think it was on the 10th floor, and walking into a contracts exam with Rhonda Jacobson, who now works here in North Queensland as a future acts lawyer at the Land Council. And walking up into that contracts exam, and we were both nervous, sleep deprived, and she's just saying to me, 51%, Robbyne, 51%. Those bonds from getting through those days, remain. And it was really important because I kind of knew in theory that law schools were the stereotype of law schools that they were full of rich white kids. And I was older, I was Aboriginal, I was not rich, and it was really, I found it a fantastic experience. I'm not saying it was a totally alienating experience, it wasn't. But we were a minority, and it was really wonderful to have a kind of structure around to support us going through those times. And I was thinking back. I'll stop telling you my life history in a moment, but I was thinking back on going the first time we went as a group to the law ball, the university's law ball. We were just all styled up and went as this group of, I think it's the first time Aboriginal students and Torres Strait Islander students have gone, had booked a table at the law ball, and it was fantastic. It was really fun. I think about this journey of strength and resilience, and think about the fact that for me a lot of it is this sort of twofold thing where it's about staying strong and uncompromising about who we are, and yet moving into mainstream as well. So those kind of, making those paths into mainstream Australia without having to compromise in unacceptable ways. We all compromise, that's part of life, but not giving up the foundational elements of who we are as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And for me, a lot of that has been about connecting to each other, about finding a voice and being able to find like-minded people and hang on to them. So, as I say, professional associations and the connections, I think meeting each other, networking is incredibly important and remains so for me today. People like Terry and Tony and Jake, Rhonda Jacobson, they're the people I call. When there's, what'll I do next? What happened? Have you done this? These are the people I call, and they're really important bonds. I wanted to just tell you a bit about the Australian Human Rights Commission, because just to give you a bit of a sense of what really in the last couple of years, a mixed term, as Social Justice Commissioner, what have we been doing? So the Australian Human Rights Commission is our national human rights institution. We have responsibility for discrimination law, the Sex Discrimination Act, the Racial Discrimination Act, Disabilities Discrimination Act, and a number of other laws. We have a complaint facility, so you can bring complaints to us. We generally conciliate them, and if possible, if the conciliation is impossible, we have to refer them these days to the federal court. So we have this strong domestic role in relation to discrimination. We also work internationally and represent, from our office, the Office of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner, the status of what's actually happening and information about what's happening to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in terms of our human rights at international forums. those international forums monitor what we're doing in relation to our international human rights obligations. One of the things that we're working towards, that the Commission's working towards, is encouraging government to ratify the optional protocol, the Convention Against Torture, which might seem like, people think, what do you mean by the Convention Against Torture? But when we reflect back on the images that we've all just seen in relation to Don Dale and the Townsville Detention Centre, and the way that we know people, not just Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, but young people and adults, children, are being treated in our places of detention. Ratifying an optional protocol will require the government to set up monitoring regimes over all places of detention. Psychiatric hospitals, anywhere where you detain people, we will be obliged to have monitoring regimes where there are reporting obligations and where there is accountability, transparency, a requirement for arm's length. And the institution won't just be able to report on itself, and also there'll be a complaint mechanism, so people can bring individual complaints under that convention once we have that optional protocol ratified. The Attorney General says it's on its way, so it looks like we will do that work. But they're important pieces of practical work that I think I'll just give you a bit of a briefing on that, so you know some of the things that we're doing at the Commission. The work particularly that Mick's been doing and I've been working with him on is also in relation to Indigenous property rights. Most of you would know that we've come through a long process of claims, a long process of claims under land rights and native title legislation. That's where our attention has been, is getting out there and asserting the rights that have now got recognition under the legislation that we have now. The new frontier for us, or it's a new frontier, although it's one that people have also been working on for a long time, is how do we engage and get economic development on that country that we've successfully asserted our pre-existing rights to? How are we going to engage in an economy that suits us, that is respectful of country, that is respectful of the people living there, that is adapted to the actual conditions? Like you can't go out where we are and go, we'll set up some tourism business. There are a few grey nomads coming through our country, out there in Western New South Wales. It's not, people just don't go, I'm just going to drive west for 8 hours from Sydney and, have my annual holiday out there. They just don't. So, you need to it's about thinking about what's properly adapted to the place. Housing, for example, people often think about home ownership and housing. That's not always a particularly from an individual's point of view, sustainable idea in areas where you're never going to be able to sell at 21, it's going to cost a lot. So we need to really do this thinking around what is properly suited for the areas. And what kind of title do we have? Because often banks and lending institutions will only lend on economic ventures where they can take security over the land. And because often the title that we get is inalienable, meaning that we can't pass it on to anybody, we can't surrender it, and we may not want to, but the law says we can't. It's held communally. Sometimes banks, and financial institutions take a big step back and go, we don't really know what to do with this. And also, we don't especially want to be coming in, collecting on this debt and taking, we don't want to be on the front page of the Australian, one of the big four banks has come in and reclaimed Aboriginal land because of a default on a debt. So we've been doing work around that because there are ways through all of these issues. They are, innovative, and there are absolutely ways through that. It's been very exciting work to be part of. The other work that that Mick really has been doing more so than me is he's been part of this, not the campaign but the thinking around the options for constitutional recognition since the beginning, since the first report. that was done into the options, and he stayed with this. He's a real advocate of it, and he's on the referendum council. He's also, I don't think you'd mind me sort of, saying he's also a great fan of agreement making and the options for agreement making. So we've been involved, I guess, not at the heart of these issues, but we have had engagement in constitutional recognition and thinking about agreement making and treaty. We have, at the moment, got our heads down doing our annual report to Parliament on the enjoyment of human rights of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, which we do. It's the duty of the Social Justice Commissioner to report on that annually to Parliament. And the other thing I'd just flag with you that we've been involved with is Mick chaired the Queensland Task Force that looked at how to redistribute the stolen wages, 21 million in stolen wages. So the final settlement really of the racially discriminatory wage laws in Queensland and the misappropriation effectively of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's money in Queensland. So the Queensland government said earlier 21 million needs to go back. And I think, you'd all know Mick's a pretty innovative thinker, and he's, thought about things like, real recognition. And the task force came up with ideas like, we know that the Queensland government held that money. They spent it on all kinds of things, on all kinds of infrastructure. So let's acknowledge on the hospitals, the railways, the infrastructure that was built on the money of on the wages of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Let's acknowledge that. Let's formally acknowledge that, and also also there was a big consultation process, and people agreed that most of it would be directly paid back to the people whose wages they were. But he also talked a lot about agreement making and a kind of ways to think more broadly by the Queensland government about how to think more broadly as a state that could deal with the unfinished business, with the entire community and the different sectors, and to think more broadly about agreement making. And it is a treaty discussion, but it's framed as agreement making and thinking about what needs to happen for us to really settle some of these issues in some way that is just, that is proper, and that deals with the core of these fundamental issues for us. That it is just over 200 years ago, there was just us, and there's been a massive process of colonisation and largely still unreconciled. Lots of inroads made into it, but there are still questions that remain. So that's some of the work that we've been doing, and all of you would know that it was the former Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner Tom Calma, who in his 2005 report stopped and said, no, we need a human rights approach to health. And he developed that human rights approach to health back then. Out of that, the Closing the Gap campaign was born. And as Carly was saying, we had the 10-year anniversary of that campaign, and the release of both reports, both the campaign's report and the government's response early this year. I think you probably know more about all this area than I do. I'll just traverse some of the issues around it. I think the short key take-home messages out of this most recent one is about the reduction in smoking rates, the reduction in infant mortality, and increased health checks. There was some discussion about the slow progress and the fact that we haven't achieved parity in relation to life expectancy. And I think what I understand and makes sense to me personally is these are long-term goals. We mustn't take our foot off the accelerator, mustn't change the commitment or reduce the commitment, just with that acknowledgement this is an intergenerational issue, and so long as we all remain committed to it, we will see more progress, but it's not something that happens of its very nature, it seems to me, to make sense. And correct me, if any of you see it differently, I'd be really interested, because that's not my area of expertise. But it does seem to make sense to me that this is something that requires sustained, long-term intensive commitment and just will happen over a period of time by its very nature. I think that the report also included commentary on the Indigenous advancement strategy, which I think is useful to have that kind of critique of how funding is delivered, how the governance of government is done. And I think that's a really useful thing for the report to do, to include that critique. And most of you would know that included critique saying it was confusing, it was overwhelming, it was onerous, it required people to spend money on being able to get in there and compete. That it lacked transparency, and that many Indigenous organisations were unsuccessful when they were asked to compete against larger organisations that had the scale but perhaps not the expertise. So I think it's really important that these kinds of reports include that kind of commentary on structural issues, on institutional issues in that way. And also I was heartened to hear Ben talk about the survey today. I think the more that we collect information on our experience of racism, the more that we can use an evidence base to continue to speak about the issues that we know, the day-to-day issues that impact on us, and reduce potentially our access and participation in the health system. And our experience of the health system, more the better, because we know it intuitively, we know it must be so, but we don't, being able to bring those statistics and that experience, I think, is really important, and to maintain the growing evidence base in that area. And the report noted that in the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Health Survey, which I know is a bit old by now, but 16% of people reported being treated badly because they're Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, and 20% of that group said that it was because that they believed it was racially discriminatory. And I think that the report then talks about the fact that we show up in hospitals a lot, and yet we have fewer procedures than other people. Now, I don't think anybody, I don't know that we know why that is, but we'd certainly like to know that it isn't because we're not receiving the kind of care that would result in a different kind of treatment, and be able to make sure that we're not showing up and not being treated in the same way as others. But I don't know that the research supports that precise outcome. Maybe I'm wrong, but it would be really, it's really important, I think, that we keep, unpicking that and understanding that, particularly from that human rights perspective, where it is, we're really concerned about the impact of racial discrimination. So I think about, what does all of that, all the kind of human rights framework, have to do with this journey towards health and towards this journey of strength and resilience? Am I running out of time? No? Okay. Talking too long? All right. I'll rely on Ben to wind me up. I wanted to just show you briefly, and maybe many of you all know this, but we celebrated on Wednesday the 9th anniversary of the adoption by the General Assembly of the United Nations, the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. 25 years of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and other Indigenous peoples around the world working with nation states to develop this document, 46 articles in it. We've kind of worked to think about what are the key principles from that, and they are these four that I think they're just a really good snapshot of a rights framework to keep in mind when you're looking at anything, and any piece of policy, any piece of legislation, whatever's going on. I think it's a really good framework to go. Does it tick these boxes? Are these things happening in this law, in this policy, in this whatever it might be? I think it gives a good kind of framework, and I think that one of the things that we really have noticed in the last few years is that we're really, I think, since the end of ATSIC, there's for a lot of us, at an institutional level, there has been a real lessening of the application of these rights. One of the things also Mick's talked about during his term is engagement, proper engagement, resetting the relationship, listening to what Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are saying, and that we need this voice, and we need to be heard by government. And that's the last. The last thing that I just wanted to talk about is the importance of being heard at both a institutional level in relation to advocacy and also at a personal level. I think it is the conclusion of most of our leadership at the moment that we are not heard. We are not heard in the way that we used to be. We are not being listened to. I think the community-controlled health sector operates at an incredible level of community control and advocacy and getting messages up to government and to policy and decision makers. But in the rest of the space, we're really just not being heard by government, by bureaucrats, and there is a real disengagement, I think. So it's really important to look at that in terms of our strength and resilience, to think about how do we hone our voices, how do we come together. And as Carly mentioned, the steering committee was part of the closing the Redfern statement. People coming together in strategic ways again to think about how do we really drive these messages, get engagement with our politicians and our senior bureaucrats. There has been a real slippage in that area, and it needs to be lifted again. I think there's an issue in relation to us also at that personal level. I was thinking about, being heard at the institutional level and being heard at a personal level. And I was thinking about my niece sent me a message on the weekend saying, tell me what you honestly think. Is it okay that when I say, she was in a chat group of some sort, I don't know, I'm too old to know about these things, whatever it was, some kind of group she was engaged in online, and she said, is it okay that when I say to them, somebody said I was very beautiful for an Aboriginal, is it okay that I'm hurt? And is it okay that when I say that in this group, they change the title of the group to political correctness gone mad? And is it okay that I feel upset about that? And I was reminded when I was 25, I was in a taxi, and the taxi driver said to me, where are you from? And I said, I'm Aboriginal. He said, you're too pretty to be Aboriginal. And I think about those things. I think, it's not okay. It's not okay, and it's absolutely, okay for her to be extremely upset. But we need to find the language for articulating that. We need to be able to find that voice. And I think about those kinds of stories and those kinds of experiences and the value that in, all of us gathering here together, that we can reaffirm our experiences, we can share those experiences, and those sorts of things, being able to talk about those things are absolutely at the heart of cultural safety. And the importance of being able to find a voice and to be heard by others, and the importance of when we're not heard, to have a safe place to come back, regroup, and do what we all have to keep doing, which is, get out there and try again. So I just wanted to leave you with that. We have a human rights framework that gives us some legal protections for our rights, and I also think about them at that personal level. So I think it is really important at this time where we are seeing a crisis on a number of fronts, or at least hearing about the crisis that, I was talking to Peter earlier, about Dondale, and that we've known for so long that these things are happening. But they're out there now, and this is a moment. This is an important moment. It's an important moment for children and youth, and an important moment for us to raise our voices, I think, and say enough of us being disengaged, enough of other people deciding. We do have answers, we do know. And raising those voices, increasing our engagement, and also at that personal note of continuing to support each other. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robyn. think it's really important for all of us here today, as Carly mentioned before. It can be really isolating to be a professional Aboriginal person out in the community, and it's such a beautiful thing for you to come here and just remind us that across all the pillars, health and law and all the other pillars of making things right for our people like yourself are fighting the fight on all fronts, as are we. Thank you. Can I just ask everyone to join me in thanking Robbyne once more? So now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Nova Peris. I'm sure she's a name familiar to everyone in the room. Do I even need to read this bio? Nova Peris is a Murrin woman from Darwin, born in Darwin from the Murrin people of Kakadu in Arnhem Land. She's a champion sportswoman and artist and devotes time to helping the community. Nova has many firsts to her name. She was the first Indigenous Australian and the first person from the Northern Territory to win an Olympic gold medal as a member of the victorious Australian women's hockey team in Atlanta in 1996. After her success in hockey, Nova focused on running, which saw her become the first Australian athlete to win international gold medals in 2 different sports. She won a Commonwealth gold in the 200 metre sprint and the 4x100 relay in the 1998 Commonwealth Games. In 2001, she won the 400 metres at the Australian Championships, and she also competed in the same event at the 2000 Sydney Olympics. But Nova's a champion, is much more than a champion in just sports. She paints traditional Aboriginal paintings. She's designed a Swatch watch, which was the coolest thing ever when I think I was about 8. It's so excellent. She's also designed 2 Olympic commemorative coins that won the 2nd prize at the World Coin Fair. In 1998, she was appointed a delegate to the Constitutional Convention, where she spoke passionately in support of Australia becoming a republic. And she's also travelled around Australia speaking to young people about her experiences and inspiring them to do their best. In 2013, she was elected to the Australian Senate. After the then Prime Minister Julia Gillard named her as a captain's pick, and she was the pre-selected Labor candidate. She's only recently retired in 2016 from the Senate, which is probably why you've got time to be here today, I assume. So, Nova would like to come up. Could I get everyone to join me in welcoming Nova?
This is where it all started for the little girl with big dreams.
This is home to me. This is the beach that I ran on as a kid and trained on, and I'd come back here just prior to the Olympics and did all my beach sprints along here. I call my mum my rock. She's my Uluru. You know, she's set an amazing foundation about, you know, getting off your backside and having a go in life.
And from an early age, Nova knew she wanted to do something special.
When she first watched the Olympics, she said, I'm going to be there one day representing my country. And we said, okay, well, you know, you're only 9 now, so what are you trying to do?
Well, triumph in Atlanta has turned Hockeyroos Nova Peris into a national heroine. A grand homecoming and a rounded reception paying homage to the Territory's first Olympic gold medalist.
She stands out not just as an Aboriginal, but as a mother
as well as a territory, as well as an Australian.
She backed herself, and she won. She also was the only person to win Olympic and Commonwealth gold in different sports, and the only person to make back-to-back Olympic finals in different sports.
For the semis, the beach has are over.
People want to talk about closing the gap. I always say, well, what gap are we closing here? You know, is it to assimilate us, or do we really want Aboriginal people to be able to stand on the same flat platform? It's being able to change the minds. Aboriginal people, can they wake up every day and have the same dreams and aspirations as white fellas?
Medalist Nova Peris has been named Young Australian of the Year. The hockey player turned athlete hopes her award will help reconciliation while inspiring other young mothers and Aborigines.
Nova Peris thought Olympic gold was the ultimate until today, when she was named Young Australian of the Year.
And it is a once-in-a-lifetime award. This goes without saying. It would have to be one of the greatest moments in my life. You know, it's not something that you wake up and think, oh, I want to be a sports person to be a role model. You know, first and foremost, everyone in life needs some sort of guidance, and if my journey has provided that, if it's inspired, you know, it's not like I intentionally wake up every day to think, oh, I want to inspire people. You know, this is my life, my journey. Where I'm at in this space is setting up girls' academies. They're actually in my name, the Nova Peris Girls' Academies. To be able to give something back so precious to these young girls is what we call the girl effect. And it's about empowering Indigenous women. So these are your goals.
Nova's also working hard to make a difference to the lives of young Aboriginal girls from remote communities. Just over a year ago, she set up the Nova Peris Girls Academy on the grounds of her old school in Darwin with daughter Jessica. While the Academy plays a vital role in educating close to 80 girls, it also plays an important role in Nova's future plans.
And, you know, that's one of the big reasons why I said yes, is because I've been part of this at a national level. I've seen the high level of dysfunction in Aboriginal communities. I've seen suicides go up. I've seen fetal alcohol syndrome go up. I've seen all of it firsthand, and it hit me for six. So much so that I thought, okay, what do I do about this? The only thing you can do is you be part of the solution. You take the small steps to make the big progression. But I was doing that at a small level. I'm doing that here at this school. You're educating young girls about, you know, the investment in education. How do they become a proud Indigenous person in 2013?
While Nova's next job will be decided in September, the grandmother and mother of Jessica, Destiny and Jack is making the most of her time at home, reflecting on her incredible journey so far.
Today, on this day, is an opportunity for all of us to speak out about reality. And I had a speech. I'm not going to read a speech because I shouldn't have to read one, because I should be able to speak from my heart and tell it how it is. So when I see that, I think to myself, why did I put my hand up for Parliament? Because I wanted to make a difference in the lives of the people who have paved the way for me today. We cannot change the past. We can't change what has happened. We can't drag the chains of this black history that this country had in order to move into the light. We have oppressed, and we continually oppress citizens that have survived for 40,000 years because of continuous failed policies. To say an Aboriginal kid has no dreams and aspirations is wrong. To tell an Aboriginal parent, you know, you don't want your children to go to school, that is absolute rubbish. We have the same dreams and aspirations. We should be allowed to flourish as human beings, as equal citizens in this country. And this whole place needs to change. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Peris. Are you happy with where you are and what you've not just achieved, but where you are at now from a platform point of view to launch from?
Through that journey from meeting you to where I am now, I've been to 65 countries around the world. And you look at that 65 countries, and I think it's 2011, almost 2012, and, you know, my people, our people, live in fourth world conditions. How is it that the oldest collective race in the world is the fastest dying race? How is it that our Indigenous children are, you know, illiterate and the numeracy is poor? You can get angry and want to be radical. I think I went down that extreme a couple of years ago, and you know, you just wanted to hate the world, and it was like black power this and everything. But I got now to a stage where I'm like, well, you can be angry and talk about it or be about it.
And Nova's mum always knew she was raising a daughter destined for great things.
Everyone said, well, where did you get that name? I thought I found it in a dictionary, and I mean, it's all about a bright shining star, ready to do something, you know, and she lived up to her name.
Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on this country we stand on today. I thank my elders, past and present, and to all you guys out there, our future leaders. Thank you to Craig for your kind invitation to just come and speak today, and also to Dr. Hayward as well. And I could get up here and talk for 2 to 3 hours of my of my life, but we thought we'd do almost like a bit of a Q&A, so hopefully I can just hit those areas which you guys really want to hear about my life. You know, sort of looking at that, it brings back some fond memories, but you know, a bit of vision. Back in 2011, I was sort of using language back then that I wouldn't use now, in terms of, you know, when you look at our Aboriginal kids, especially in remote communities, when you think of them and the terminology used as they're illiterate. You know, I use their language now that they're multilinguals. You know, they're very smart, articulate young kids. But anyway, let's have this Q&A discussion. Yeah, come on.
We could get some questions from you guys later. We're just starting the call off. I'd say firstly, you've worked in a lot of different sectors, particularly, I think...
Ben, we can't hear you.
Oh, yeah, you got to come and
Sorry.
Yep.
You've worked across a lot of different sectors that are famous, I think, for being somewhat racist. Especially lately, I think sport's getting a particularly bad rap, and certainly politics, I don't think has ever had the best reputation. And the theme for our conference is building strength and resilience. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your experiences in those two difficult sectors and how you developed your own strength and resilience.
Okay. So, for me, I'm a proud Aboriginal woman. You know, I'm a Moran woman of West Arnhem, but also a Gidja woman from the East Kimberleys and a Yarra woman from the West Kimberleys. So I've walked proud in the skin for 45 years. And, you know, there's a saying, you get knocked down 7 times, you get back up 8. And I think, as a kid growing up in Darwin, I never really understood racism. You know, almost the majority of people in the Northern Territory are Aboriginal. We had a tough sort of, well, I don't know what you call it tough, but Mum was a member of the Stolen Generation. She was 8 years old when she was taken off her mum and sent to the Tiwi Islands mission for 8-9 years, where she thought she was just going on a boat trip. My grandmother, Nova Peris, she was 2 years old when she was taken off. Her mother, who was a full-blood Aboriginal, her father was a white Irishman. She was born in a place called Mullabulla, which is not far from the Horse Creek region. And, you know, her attire was a Hessian bag. You know, for 12 years, and the Second World War came along, and they, you know, all the Gadiya people, the white people left the Kimberley kids, and all the mission kids had to rove the Kimberleys, you know, for 3-4 years. That's where she met my grandfather, who was born in Broome. He was sent to the Beagle Bay mission when he was 6 years old. Learned how to ride horses. He became a stockman and then drove cattle from the West Kimberleys to the East Kimberleys, met Nana, had 4 kids there. You know, when you had to stop paying Aboriginal people rations and start paying them wages, all of a sudden Aboriginal people got laid off work, and then he got sent up, he moved up to Darwin to work on the railway line, and that's when Nana was pregnant for her 5th child 4 of her children, my mum being the eldest, got taken off her and sent to the Tiwi Island mission. So when I'm confronted with racism, I sort of think, well, racism, you're not born racist. You know, it's born out of ignorance. It's, I look at that person, I think you're a highly uneducated person, you know, and so when things really get me down, when you look at the theme of your conference, it's about resilience. And I always think, you know, I was born physically gifted. You know, I had talent, and Mum grew up as a single mum in Housing Commission, and she planted that seed of education in mine and my sister's head. So we valued education, and you know, as a single mum had choices. She could have, you know, thought, I'm living in Housing Commission. I could have gone into drugs and alcohol and hated the world, but she had 2 kids, you know, that she wanted to bring into this world. And so when it comes to the racism side of things, like growing up in Darwin, I had a white stepfather, an Aboriginal father, Aboriginal mother, grew up in the urban setting. Mum was they're all part of the stolen generation, so they really didn't talk much about culture. Yet on my father's side, I've got family who still live out on country and are very traditional in their ways. So I've walked in those both worlds, and I think it's really important that we all have to walk in those 2 worlds as Aboriginal people. And so one of my first experiences of hardcore racism was when I was playing hockey for the Northern Territory, and I just cut through the Australian 21s, and I was vying for team Australian selection. And I went to shake this girl's hand she's playing for New South Wales, and she sort of spat on the ground and she said, I'm not shaking you, you're just a black bitch. And I was like, rightio. And I thought after, you know, it cut to the bone, and I looked at that girl and I thought, okay, she's vying for the same spot as me. I'm an easy target. I'm the only black one out there playing. I was an easy target too. You know, she wanted to ruffle my feathers. So, you know, cut a long story short, that was the only time I'd sort of really experienced racism in the hockey fraternity was in this country. Wasn't overseas where I'm judged as an athlete, wearing the green and gold. Never experienced racism at an international level. In athletics, I remember, and I ended up taking this fella to the Sporting Court of Arbitration, where we were sitting in Budapest, and this was on the eve of us going to World Championships, and he was wearing the green and gold, I was wearing the green and gold, and he says to me, he goes, pass the salt, nigger. And I was like, sorry, can you repeat that? And he goes, pass the salt, nigger. And I said, how about I pick it up and chuck it over your effing head? And I just thought, you know, that, again, that stuff, and these people who have attacked me, one, it's because, you know, they're ignorant fools themselves, and they wanted to attack me, they wanted to shoot me down, so to speak. It's like with the Adam Goods situation. If we can't grow into our skin, grow into our inherited responsibilities, then I think we fail our ancestors, I think we fail our grandparents, I think we fail everyone who has walked a tougher road than what we are today. So in politics, I never really had racism. I was never sort of, apart from George Brandis, who got up in the Senate and said, you know, when I asked him about wanting to water down the Racial Discrimination Act, and I said to him, won't weakening the Racial Discrimination Act give the green light to bigotry? And then he gets up all chuffed and pounding his chest. He said, well, Senator Peris, everyone has a right to be a bigot, you know? So I thought, you know, if you want people to change, if we want to send a strong message to our children, it starts from that real leadership. And when you've got the Attorney General of this country saying it's okay to be a bigot, you know, it sickens me. And I think the Australian people, when, you know, the whole change.org sort of thing come along, and that was just wiped off the table, but now, you know, they want to reintroduce it. You had all these people led by your Pauline Hansons of the world, and who just want to bring it back on and say, well, let's weaken the Racial Discrimination Act, even though it's been there for 25 years and served this country well. So it's alive and well. I think, you know, my skin's pretty tough. You know, there's a saying, you know, you can't drive out hate with hate. You can't drive out, you know, darkness with darkness. It's the light and the love that I just continue to share to people, and people hate that. It messes with their head. So does that answer that one question? See, this is why I'm doing it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So one of the other things that's really important to us here at AIDA is our traditional healers, and recognising that our people have taken care of our health for thousands and thousands of years, and we have our Nunkari here. I'm not sure if they're in the room, no. Who are traditional healers. Do you have any experiences you could share with us about traditional healing and the impact that that's had on you that you'd be willing to share?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't function in 2016 without traditional healing. I know that, you know, going down to Parliament sittings and that fight, it wears you out when you're continuously having to fight for something. Then you have to justify why you're fighting, and that sort of circle, it wears you down. And so every time I'd come back from Canberra, go back to Darwin, I'd jump on my four-wheel drive and head out bush, you know, just to sit on country. And you know, I'm surrounded by my ancestors out on country. And I think that's, you know, we have the five senses, but I think in an Aboriginal spiritual world, you know, we're in tune with our sixth sense, and that used to give me so much. You know, people, I guess, you know, people go to church, they pray, and they ask for healing, whatever. That was my healing, was my ancestors and calling out to them and sitting on that country, and it reinvigorated me. And you know, if I was going to places like Santa Teresa or wherever it may be, if someone was giving a smoking ceremony, I'd want to tip that whole bucket of leaves all over my head and just, you know, because that gave me strength, you know, and I loved it, and I used to always take my kids back. You know, I have a collection of rocks that have been given to me. Sometimes I just walk around with the rocks in my pocket. People think I'm crazy, but you know, that just certain things from country always gives me strength, and you can't, you know, underestimate the power of our traditional healings. I know I'd go to the Garma Festival, the Yolngu woman would do some amazing spiritual healing with the pandanus leaves and the oils and the ochre. But yeah, I'm not complete in life if I don't have at least 2 or 3 healings a year. You know, going back to country, or whether it's someone's performing a healing ceremony. A couple of weeks ago I was out in Torquay, and you know, just the smell of that leaves burning, it's important. I think when you talk about, especially in the industry with the Indigenous Doctors Association, that whole thing about well-being around an Aboriginal person, even like the word suicide, like, you know, that was never in our language. There was actually no word at all in the Yolngu Matha. There's no word for suicide. It just didn't happen. And you know, you look at someone like Albert Namatjira, when you hear about his story, how he became a citizen 10 years before anyone else in 1957, and he drank alcohol, shared it with his brothers, and because that's what you do, is you share things with your people and your family. He went to jail, and they said when he came out of jail, he died within 2 months his spirit was broken. So when you talk about the mental health and well-being of an Aboriginal person, I always talk about it as their spiritual well-being, because that's what sort of completes us. I don't think, oh, they've got a mental illness. It goes back to that whole spiritual, yeah, their spiritual well-being.
As we mentioned just before, I guess you're unique in a lot of ways, making the transition from sport to politics. And you spoke about family and culture being a really big part of building strength and staying resilient. I'd be really interested in hearing how sport perhaps helped you build resilience or impacted your life in politics.
Yeah, I don't think, like I represented Australia for 13 years. And I got to go to 2 Olympic Games, 5 World Championships and a couple of one Commonwealth Games and 2 Champions Trophies with hockey. And I think the resilience you build up in sports certainly helped me in politics. The only thing I find in sports is that you knew when your opponents were coming at you, they came at you in front. I think in politics they all come from behind. So you're always constantly just looking over your shoulder or that. But one thing I found in sports is you can only control the controllables. Like, like in sports, like I won the Commonwealth Games at 200 metres by 0.02 of a second, which is like that. But, the training and everything that goes into it is just phenomenal. And in politics, what I found was there are certain things like the racism that I got, like I was saying, I never really got it from other political colleagues, except for that George Brandis, but the amount of racism that came in via social media, I got letters almost once a week, with targets on my head and, people wearing KKK hoods and just sending it was vile, it was disgusting. And, I built up a resilience to that. It didn't mean that it didn't hurt me, but it just meant that I was able to put that aside and just concentrate, because they're all the detractors. And I think that's what happens in sport. There's always going to be your detractors, people wanting to knock you off. I think, as an Aboriginal person, you sometimes have to be twice as good, because people will point that finger and say, oh, you're only there because you're Aboriginal. And I got that a lot during my hockey days. People like, oh, she's only in the Australian hockey team because she's Aboriginal. Really? Like, tell that to the other 15 girls that I play hockey with and ask them if I should be there. Why, it was voted the best left half in the world for a couple of years straight. So, certainly, I think it's almost like if you can't control the controllable, you can only control how you react to that outcome. You may not like it, you may hate it, and you think, what am I going to do? You may not be able to, but you can only, and I think that's looking after yourself as well, is how you can contain yourself, how you react to certain things. And like I said, going back to the racism side of things, my husband is a white fella. He wanted to kill people. Not really kill people, but he was so angry. He was more hurt than me, and he's like, doesn't that shit upset you? I'm like, I remember this one time after I won Commonwealths, and Kathy Freeman and I were training, and this mail came from the Victorian Institute of Sport, and this guy just said, oh, there's some mail for you, and Kathy, no, it must have been, it was fan mail, and this one was, oh, you're nothing but a black so-and-so, you can't even run for shit, your legs are shit, and this, everything was like, really, I'm the Commonwealth champion. Screw it up, chuck in the bin. But yeah, it's certainly one of those things you build up a resistance to it, but the higher you climb in life, the more people want to see you fall as well. So I just keep plodding away. I don't have any sort of regrets in politics. People don't realise how hard it is on the way from your family for 21 weeks of the year. It used to take me 8.5 hours to get from Darwin to Canberra. The first lot of school holidays this year, I saw my son, who was at boarding school, saw him for 4 days, saw one of my daughters for 24 hours. And I thought, I don't have to do this. And, I think in politics, everything's just reactive to its 24-hour news cycle, people looking for comments. Oh, so-and-so said this, what's your comment on this? Like, man, I want to get 8,000 buffaloes over to Vietnam. There are certain things that their whole priorities, what in my head was a priority, wasn't fitting politics at the time. And so where I'm in now, back in the government and back in sport and recreation and looking at opportunities for young Aboriginal kids is something that I'm passionate about, always have been. And so, yeah, it's not to say I won't go back though. Just putting it out there.
And finally, from me, before we go to the floor, I think that priority for us, clearly here at AIDA, is improving the health and well-being of our people through any means that we can. Do you have any insights or views on how you might suggest, from your vast experience, that we can work on for improving the health of our people?
I think what I have found is the whole substance abuse, where people resort to that, and alcohol has been played a big factor to the detriment of our people right across this country. And like in the Northern Territory, for example, the most expensive single piece of infrastructure was the New Berrima Jail. $600 million, and it's filled, 85% of it's filled with Aboriginal people, and predominantly obviously men. And out of that percentage of the crimes that they're in there for, nearly 65% of it being through alcohol. They've been intoxicated when they've created the crime. And I think if you see a lot of these documentaries where people do resort to drugs and alcohol, and you look at the increase of fetal alcohol syndrome, young kids or girls getting pregnant at such a young age, it goes back to that self-worth. I keep drawing it back, and it goes back to that identity side of things as well. If you don't feel good about yourself, if you don't see hope, if you don't see that shining light, people think, well, what am I here for? What's there to live for? And hence the suicide, and hence the uptake of alcohol, violence, all that sort of stuff. I mean, there's so much that we have to unpack as people. And I'll never forget, last year we had a Senate inquiry into children out of home care, in the foster care or in residential care, and we had the Northern Territory Stolen Generation come in. They gave evidence, and this one fellow who grew up on the islands with my mum on the mission, he said to me, Nova, as an Aboriginal boy growing up on that mission, we never had any man in our life to tell us how to grow up to be a man, what to do as a man, how to treat other women. We had, and my mum, she doesn't really talk about her time on the mission, but she came out and she said, I said, Mum, why don't you eat mangoes? She said, it was just a stupid random thing, but she was saying because when she was on the mission, the kids used to climb the mango tree, they used to get belted, with a plank of wood for eating a mango on the mission. And so I sort of think when you look at the intervention that happened in 1997, I think it was, if you want to break a household, you go and you attack the man. I think all Aboriginal men were painted with that one brush, and people have never sort of really gotten over that. They're still soul searching, and it breaks my heart, and that's hence probably 70% of the reason why I left politics. I've got a 12-year-old son who's was down at boarding school, and he used to cry and cry when I say goodbye to him. I'd be crying my eyes out. I was just thinking, what sort of mother is doing this to a child? My girl was all right. She loves boarding school, but my 12-year-old son, and I got sick and tired of it in Parliament that you'd hear the words of that an Aboriginal boy's got more chance of going to jail than they have of finishing year 12 or going to university. So I've got a 12-year-old boy, and his entrance level going into this private boarding school is 98%. Which was it was phenomenal. And he's a proud Indigenous boy, but he was only one of 12 in a school of 1,200, and I was sort of like, is he going to lose his identity? Is he going to lose his way? So, I made that call to leave, but I think I want my son to grow up, because his hero was Adam Goodes. And, the media threw kryptonite at that fella. So what message does that put into a young Aboriginal boy's head when you hear so much media around the negativity of the life of a cycle of an Aboriginal boy, or who wants to play AFL football? If you be proud of who you are, you celebrate who you are, you're going to get shot down for it. So I think in saying that, we're better than that, I think, as Aboriginal people. And I sort of often look at how, since, you know, whenever it was in the 17th century, people came here. And, you know, everyone's come with their language, they've come with their identity, they've come with their religious beliefs. They come with something to come to this country to better their lives. And who have been the oppressed people who have lived and flourished for 40,000 years, and we can't celebrate who we are. When we get something, some sort of right, we've got to justify, we've got to defend it, we've got to rally and say, yes, we're here, you know. So I sort of think we are more powerful than what we actually realise we are. You know, I think what an Aboriginal person, i.e. Adam Goods, when me in Parliament, when I get up, you know, they came, when I spoke out in Parliament, the letters came, the phone calls came to my office. So when you speak out of your box, people are threatened by that. They're threatened because we are resilient people. We haven't gone away. We haven't fled to another country. We are so, you know, we've got the WIC decision. We've got, you know, land rights in this country. We've got a lot of rights. And I think when we assert those rights, people are threatened by it. So I tell my son, you know, he flies his Aboriginal flag. I make sure all my kids are proud to say that they are Aboriginal kids in this country. You know, we might be that 2%, but we're a powerful force to be reckoned with. And when you look at what happened when the government tried to shut down those 150 communities because of lifestyle choices, you know, there were like 35 rallies across the world. There are only 19 in this country. So the world are awakened to what's going on in this place. And I think, yeah, we just need to, you know, continue to gel together, continue to fly that flag, that brings us together, that unites us. But the work that you're doing, assert who you are. You know, yes, you're Aboriginal. That's what I do that every single day of my life, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So, yeah, that's me.
So let's take it to the floor now. We've got, I think, 15 minutes for questions for any of these lovely ladies. We have a roving mic somewhere. Have mine, Pete.
I've got one. Got a mic, hello. I know, but thank you so much. Very inspiring. I'm a GP from Queensland, and I must say, just the recent stuff that was going around social media around our old mate in the Central Coast chiropractor. I have to applaud your grace and the way that you handled that. And it was really interesting for me to watch it unravel around social media. And I'm just probably wondering your comments, particularly around how you protect your children from that sort of stuff, because that's the stuff that's always out there. So I don't know if everyone knows about what happened. Just Google, if you want to, Nova chiropractor. Because I just wanted to check it was where that fellow was from. And, you know, in the olden days we used to get the letters, I suppose, but now we can just be attacked through social media. But all of my non-Indigenous friends were getting so wild about it. And it was, I don't know how many shares it ended up having, and particularly your response to it. But I'd love to know how you know, protect yourself and your family, because our medical students get attacked in different ways, and social media is perhaps now another way we just get that sort of casual racism. I mean, your instance wasn't casual at all, but I mean, I wanted to fire up and fucking get in amongst it, right? Fucking come on! And but I had to contain myself and try to follow, role model your grace. So maybe some of us need to learn what you've got to share.
Yeah. Because that day it happened, it was 2 days, I think, or the day before the Dreamtime at the G. So, like, getting into that day, it was, you know, everyone's celebrating, you know, what Michael Long did, and wasn't reconciliation, what was that week? Reconciliation week. Yeah, it was. And So when it happened, I was in the passenger, my husband was driving. I was in Melbourne, and I was on Facebook, and it came up. And I pulled over, and I said to my husband, pull over. He said, what for? I said, I'm going to respond to this fella, he's making me wild here. So I just responded, and the way that I've dealt with other stuff, and that's what I said, it'd be easy to block and delete, but I'm going to leave it here just to show people, and because, it was like attacking me, stop wearing that white shit on your face and blah, 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 and all that sort of stuff. And so I thought, it seriously took me 2 minutes to respond to him. And I left it there. And because the way he put it was sort of on the commentary, it was like on a newsfeed sort of thing. So my husband screenshot it and put it at the top. And it just had racism stops with me. And from that, it had nearly 4 million shares, and it went viral. And I actually met the lady who started at change.org. And within 24 hours, there was more than 20,000 people that signed on to it, which shows that, no one wants to be part of a country that attacks someone in this way. So normally it's block and delete, block and delete. That saying, ain't nobody got time for that. That's how I feel. I'm not letting your negative shit into my life, and that's how I normally deal with stuff. I block, delete, block, and every now and then I'll name and shame. And that's what happened, like it set a precedent. The copper who responded to it, went and caught up with old mate, and he tried to say, oh, it wasn't me, and someone recorded it, then it came out, and then he went to court. And he said, oh, he had a brain snap. So, 60 whatever year old, you'd think he's a business owner, had a brain snap and wanted to attack me. And he was saying, oh, his family have disowned him and he blah, blah, blah. And so when he went to court, so he's on a good what do you call it? Good behaviour. So if he stuffs up in the next 8 months, he's going to jail for 18 months. And so that's the power of, if you stand up and take action. So since then, I'd say the Gosford Police Station have been inundated with people wanting to throw stuff, but it is very serious. The whole racism side of things, if it doesn't just attack you, it attacks my children. And what I do with my kids, I sit down and have a conversation. And, Destiny, she's at boarding school in Sydney. It's water off a duck's back now. She's like, whatever, another loser, Mum. I said, yeah, another loser. But yeah, it is hard because, when I'm feeling down and out, my kids certainly feel that. And you do have a sense of obligation to protect your children, but at the same time, you can't dismiss them from the hardcore reality of what's going out there. So yeah, like I said, I just want my kids to grow up in this country knowing what their inherited obligations are and what their rights are, and to assert that.
Thank you. Peter O'Mara. My question is for both of you. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for your presentations. I'd like to thank both of you for sharing your stories with us, and thank you both for doing what you do. Really appreciate it. To the start of the question, I suppose, the background for it would be that my understanding is that federal laws can't push aside a state law, but for our territories they can. And then thinking about the very racist policies that our government put on our people with the Northern Territory so-called emergency response, my understanding is they had to suspend the Racial Discrimination Act in order to do that stuff to our people. My thought is, how do we stop that kind of thing happening into the future, to protect our people from those kinds of things should they come around again? Because I'm sure at some point they will.
Do you want to answer? Thanks. I think that's a really good question, and the difficulty with the way the law is structured is that it provides. The law says it's unlawful to discriminate against people on the basis of race and a number of other criteria, and then so that we can have measures that are discriminatory but that we want, like, for example, the Native Title Act, you'd say, well, that is a law that provides for, in a way, I don't know exactly how it works, but it's a law that provides for special treatment on the basis of race. So in order to allow for positive things, there are exemptions to that prohibition against racial discrimination. But what is positive, qualifies as a positive measure and that ought to be exempt is really a matter for interpretation. And so then we move into this territory where Parliament will say this law is a positive measure. It is going to help people, and that was the way that the intervention was characterised. If we want to challenge that, we can go to the High Court, but our real precedent for that is the Hindmarsh Island case, where a bridge was built. There was a proposal for a bridge. Probably a lot of you too young to remember this case. I always forget how old I am, but anyway, there was a proposal in South Australia to build a bridge. It was going. There was the local people said that will desecrate sites of significance for us, and they opposed it. The case went on for years because it went off into this territory of whether the minister had considered things that he should or shouldn't have, and it was a long saga. The upshot was that the court held that that could be exempt, that not discriminating, but they were just unclear about what was going to be exempt. So we just don't have that kind of lack of clarity in this country at the moment. It's an unresolved question for us, which is why people are thinking we ought to bring in, why the constitutional recognition discussion is about should we have a referendum that includes a proposition that says we want a prohibition against racial discrimination or all discrimination in our constitution. It seems fairly sensible to me, but that's where, this whole, campaign that we always hear this rhetoric, oh, we can't have a Bill of Rights. I don't really understand why. We have a very well-trodden path that says we can't have a Bill of Rights in this country. I honestly have no idea why, but it's got a lot of traction out there. So it's a really live question. We don't know the answer to it. But that is why one of the propositions, when we hear about, is constitutional recognition going to just be about symbolic change, and people say, no, it has to be more than that, then there are a number of ways that could be interpreted, a number of sort of legs to that, the more substantive things that could be in the Constitution, and one of them is that prohibition against discrimination in our Constitution. You would still, though, the upshot, however, would still be if you had something that was questionable, you'd still end up in the High Court, and it would still be up to those judges largely to say, is this racially discriminatory, or is it what we describe as, as a special measure that is for the benefit of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people? And we know that, what's considered for our benefit. And I just look back and think about the levels of control, where, the levels of control over us that are seen as beneficial, management of our lives, control of our lives, and, kind of this continual kind of fencing us in terms of income management and, whole world of, we have a whole history of control, of government control, and it's still, being played out for our benefit. So we would still end up with those, that bench of, 7 judges or however many there are in the High Court making that determination ultimately because of the legal system that we have. But hopefully, the more we talk about it, the more we say, you might think this is for our benefit. That's that stuff about, being self-determining. The more we can raise this, and people like Nova who have, raised their voices in our public forum, with all the difficulty, it's just wonderful to hear you talk about it, and listening to the cost of that but the benefit of that is, we raise our voices and start saying, no, we know, you do not have to decide for us anymore, you know. Maybe we can decide in collaboration, but stop these measures of control and deciding that you know better for us and listen to us. So the more we do that, and the more that, you know, women like Nova and, you know, are out there raising these voices, the more we change, I think, that I have hope that the more we change the public discourse. And eventually, you know, like I was at law school in the 80s. Chief Justice Mason was the he was the Chief Justice of the High Court at the time. He had some interesting, well, it was the time of Narbonne. There was this outcry about judicial activism. Judicial activism, the court is supposed to just interpret black letter law, they're not supposed to be activists. But the more we talk about, and that changed the way the High Court was seen. You know, it seems crazy to think about it as judicial activism, but very conservative space. But the more we raise our voices up, the more we change that public discourse, and the more we get an expectation that what is discriminatory will be something we say is discriminatory, not that other people decide is good for us. Thanks.
We might have time for one more question, I think. Any hands? There's a hand.
Hello, my name is Naralee. I was just wondering, I'm pretty interested, I guess, in public health and public Indigenous health, and I guess that kind of big picture image. And I was just wondering if either of you would have any idea, are there particular like types of maybe Indigenous doctors or doctors in general that I guess the Parliament would find, I guess, highly respected and would be listened to more so than others? Or is there a field or something that you would think would be a bit more taken seriously, kind of thing? Yeah, I guess that's just my question. Yeah.
In my time in Parliament, during the 3 years, we had a number of events like Closing the Gap Day, and where politicians would come with their painted on ears. Because, there are so many formidable people in this country, Aboriginal people, and I used to get really shamed when I would sit there and you get your Indigenous groups who would come and lobby government for money and talking about the Indigenous, advancement, I call it the Indigenous annihilation strategy, because it goes back to what Robbyne was saying. It's people are reluctant to give up control. Because what does it mean if an Aboriginal person has full, their full identity, full self-worth, self-determination? What does that look like for an Aboriginal person? How much easier would that be if they had all those luxuries in life? But it goes back to that government. You could get your people like your Dr. Mark Wennertongs and your professors that would come through Parliament House and put proposals on the table. That speech that I gave at my what you saw bits of, I spoke about it, all those proposals. We've had the solutions for years. But do people want to grab that with both hands and hand over the driver's seat to an Aboriginal person? Probably not. Because, I've always said it, and you look at the intervention, the findings of the intervention, how many child sexual abuses were there? Or was it all about access to land? And I've said that many a times. There's no hidden agenda there. It's right in your face. You've got 90% of the coastline in the Northern Territory, which is Aboriginal owned water lines. What do you call it? The coastal reserves. 57% of the entire landmass at 1.2 million square kilometres is owned by Aboriginal people. It's not just native title. It's actually, the Northern Territory Land Rights Act is probably the most powerful land rights act in the country, and Aboriginal people have the power to say no. That's it. We don't want mining on our land. We don't want X, Y, Z on our land. But if you want access to it, you remove what's on top of it. And I think, you know, all these mandatory laws that have come in, you know, if you're not living out in your outstation, we're just going to stop water access to it. So there's, when you read between the line, it's not hard to work out what's going on, you know, really in this country when it comes to the accessibility to what, you know, builds wealth in this country, and however you determine wealth. And I've said it many times, and when I started, you know, I had it known to me when I left Parliament, a couple of prominent Aboriginal people said to me, you know, when you started speaking out the way you did, people came after you. So, yeah, there's an agenda there. And, you know, when you look at the population that we have in this country, when you talk about constitutional recognition, what does that mean? I love Michael Mansell's, I got one of his papers, he was like, recognise, you want to, we've never been lost. Now you want to put us in your founding document and find us and tell us how we should be recognised, and, you know. So again, we're being told how we should be recognised, you know, got to rely on 98% of the population to vote yes, because we've never been found, or whatever you call it. So, I don't know. I think, you know, right now, even through one of the scholarship organisations, Australian Indigenous Education Fund, there's 520 Aboriginal people, young kids across the country on first-class scholarships. And so these kids have to be careful that they don't lose who they are, but have to learn to walk in those two worlds. And I think the more educated we become, the more doctors we are, you know, I'm Gavin saying I'm a doctor now. But yeah, I take my hat off to you, you know, studying wasn't my greatest thing in life. I'm a physical person, I was always out there mowing lawns as a kid and, you know, running and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, you know, I think together, you know, it's those small steps. People used to say to me, you know, what was it like winning the Olympic gold medal? I said it was, you know, climbing the highest mountain and having that view. And in politics is it's the same sort of thing, but you got to move that mountain. And can we do what you can, stone by stone? So I think nothing's impossible in life. There is a world of possibilities, and I think we're strength in numbers. You know, the more things we have out, the more pride we have in ourselves, and to sell us who we are as human beings, to say we are worthy citizens in this country. So, yeah. I hope that sort of answered your question in terms of the solutions are out there, but do people want to give up that control factor? And I think, you know, you're spot on what you said.